Okay, we're with Dave Daniels today. We're going to talk about product launches. I'm Greg, admin of the group, and we took some questions ahead of time. I am going to ask the first one, and we'll just go through them. We got started a little late due to some technical issues, but we'll go for like 20 minutes, and then
Yeah.
unfortunately I have a stop. So, Dave, the first question about product launches is Shachar Brenner says that it's always interesting to hear about the balance between too early, too late. So launch timing.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's no single, it's one of those questions that always starts with the answer, it depends, right? There's so many variables going on here. So let's look at a few things. When is it too early? When is it too late? Well, too late, of course, would be when you have a scenario where you're launching a product into a market that is already saturated or overserved, right? So if you think of any market segment that you can break down, a simple way to think about whether you should go after a market segment or not, it's just one dimension, mind you, is this market segment underserved? Is it adequately served, or is it overserved? Now, every one of those can be a winner depending on the products. Now, if it's underserved and there's definitely a need and there's some motivation to solve that problem, then you got a winner. If it's adequately served, you enter in that market, you just have to make sure that you have a differentiator, a unique value proposition that allows you to stand out. Now, when it's overserved, the only play you really have is disrupt it. Disrupt that market segment. So you've got to do something that just shakes the tree and changes everything. And there's lots of great examples in the market of companies that do that. They completely change the rules, and then their product becomes the dominant player. So that's in terms of too early, too late. Another thing you need to be thinking about, and you mentioned it in your question, is the maturity. Now, you said product maturity. I'm going to spin that just a little bit to product category maturity. So what is the maturity of all products in that category for which you compete? And the same kind of rules apply, and the association between underserved, adequately served, and overserved certainly applies here. So in a really, really early category, sky's the limit. So get out there, get a product that's good enough, get some traction, start growing, learn, grow, build. But as you get further and further to the right in the market and the category becomes more mature, then you have to be looking at where are my niches within this overall large market, my market segments that are either underserved or adequately served where I can jump in. So there's a little bit of science and there's a little bit of art and intuition, but your best bet is to make sure that you have a solid understanding of what the problem is, why it needs to be solved, why someone's going to give you money to solve that problem. And do these people actually, are they motivated? Do they have a sense of urgency to solve that problem? So it isn't necessarily what's convenient, it's what's going to help you get, the objective that you're trying to get to in the launch. So an example of launching too early, though, Greg, if I may, I'm going to continue on this a little bit. Another way of thinking about it is your organizational readiness. So you don't want to launch a product if the rest of the organization can't keep up. All right, so support can't support the product. Sales has no idea what they're talking about. Marketing hasn't done any promotion. All of the things, you can't deliver it, right? So all of those things that are necessary. Sorry, I'm moving my whole desk as I talk, shaking things around a little bit. There we go. I get a little too animated. My apologies. The other thing you need to think about is when is the timing right? Right. So think about when they launch a rocket, NASA, European Space Agency, any of them. Right. There's an individual there called the launch director. The launch director has a really big job, and one of those responsibilities is they can say no when everybody else is saying yes. right? Sales might be saying, "Hey, give me that product. I've got to sell something. I need something new to sell to my customers." But they're not ready to sell and we're not ready to deliver. Or you might have executives saying, "We got to have something to talk about. We haven't had anything to talk about in 3 quarters." So you have to have the discipline to look at the organization to say, "Are we actually ready?" If I pull the trigger and we can start selling the product and deliver it to customers, are we going to fall down and embarrass ourselves, or will we be, reasonably successful and proud of our efforts? So, too late's easy. The sun's already set, and you're trying to chase that sun. So sometimes you just got to pack it in.
Thanks, Dave. The next question we have is about how do you choose the set of features that you want to launch? But I want to back up and ask some fundamental questions, like, do we only launch new products? When we talk about launch, does that mean new products? Can we launch an incremental version? So yeah, this whole idea about scope makes me think, I associate launches with big releases. I worked in these big vendors and that's the way we did it. But what is your perspective on that? Is launch just about something new in the market, a new product?
Well, I think we'll just take a step back and we'll start with grounding all of us on, well, what's the purpose of the launch, right? Why do we do it? And the purpose of the launch is to accelerate some business objective, right? So now then that takes us down to, and notice I use the word accelerate, right? So get more of what we want faster. So what are we trying to get? Well, then that gets us to our launch objectives. So most of us are trying to sell more stuff, generate revenue, but that's not the only reason you would launch. What if you had a product that's been on the market for a number of years and, maybe it's getting a little old and it needs to be revitalized a little bit, and you embarked on a huge effort to update the foundation, put a whole new technology base in and added some significant new capabilities. Well, you might choose to launch that too, to say, hey, look at us. We're not, old geezers anymore. We actually have some new stuff that's modern and, all the new cool kids are going to like it too. So that's another area. So if you think about what should go in the product before you launch, it should be, is this a release or is this a launch? So, a release is something that, I'm a recovering developer and a recovering product manager. I've done both. A release is something that we work our butts off to get out the door, right? We get it done. And then we either decide to ship it to customers or we put it on the shelf and we wait. And sometimes it makes sense to wait because there's the ability to create that momentum, that acceleration that we're looking for. If we time it with something else, like a big industry event or, the signing of a new government regulation for which our product is associated with, or some other, compelling event where we can attach to that would allow us to accelerate. So think about it. I know it's trite and overused, but think about this, right? So when we're sending spaceships to a very long distance, like Mariner and all those others, they find planets to loop around to give them additional acceleration. So think of those as like those moments where you can get additional acceleration to go faster and faster. And so maybe features are part of that and you can really pump them up. And in other cases, maybe you go, wow, we added a bunch of new features, but it's not like going to set the world on fire. So we decide to either just gently let them escape the building and get them out to customers, or we wait until something big and compelling come along later, then decide what to launch. But I wouldn't use launch as the driver for what the feature set is until you've defined what the objective is. So if the objective is, let's say, customer retention, reducing churn, then that can help drive the product side of the house to decide, what do we need to do to reduce churn? Let's analyze it. Let's understand why customers are leaving and so forth.
Yeah, so Dave, what I took away from that is we should probably decouple in our minds releases from launches. I can launch
Hmm.
something that was released a long time ago. I can launch something that I haven't really released yet, right? I could try to build this momentum you're talking about even before I release the stuff. I can have a launch that coincides with the release. It's a decision, right? And has to do
I
with
can
my risk
relaunch
profile.
something that
Yeah.
I can relaunch something that's been in the product for years, but no one even knows it's there.
That's
Yep.
a super cool
Yeah.
observation. The second question that Bart had, Bart Jaworski, is he refers to this idea of a soft and a hard launch.
Hmm.
What are the, I've heard those terms. I think I have some intuition about what they mean, but what do they mean to
Yeah.
you? What's the difference?
Yeah. The simplest way of describing it is a soft launch is an under the radar. Let's not make a big deal about it. Oftentimes we do soft launches. I'll tell you an example. Examples are always better. Let me give you an example of when I would use a soft launch. Let's say that I'm introducing a brand new product. And let's say that this new product has some cool new stuff, but the market is mature and my buyers are risk adverse, right? They're not going to jump on the bandwagon because something's new. They look at what they have and they go, hey, this works. Why should I change it? So, and those buyers are the kind of buyers who are so risk adverse, they don't want to be the first ones to get your product. They want to see somebody else that's familiar to them using the product and saying nice things, right? A referral. So in a soft launch, I might do a first stage where I go out and all I'm focusing on is getting customer references. That's it.
Mhm.
And I'll define what a reference, a good reference looks like. One that would be represented in that market segment, one that would be valued by other potential customers. And then once I have my reference customers, or sometimes we refer to them as launch customers, once I have those, then and they're all written up, then I can now change gears. And I might keep that really low. I may only work with a handful of my sales reps because I have targeted accounts I'm looking at. But soft is just means I'm not going to invest a whole lot in the promotional activities until I get to a point where I have what I need in order to put the foot on the gas and accelerate.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So soft launch is really smaller, subtler, may have a more specific goal. It's probably like a subset. I think I've
Mm-hmm.
seen the term used in big companies when it may be a new product and the organization isn't necessarily ready for scale. So you do a
Mm-hmm.
soft launch to get some feedback to figure out, what's broken, where things work. And then later you may do a much bigger launch once you're more confident. So that,
I'm going to be a little bit more jaded on that, and I'm going to say sometimes soft launch is really the substitute for a beta.
yeah, okay.
It's a little jaded. I know, sounds a little negative, but it's when we don't have the confidence whether we can sell this thing or not. We don't have the confidence that the product's big. We don't have the confidence that there's a willing market that wants to solve this problem, but we built it. And so now, rather than doing all the validation we should have done before we built it or while we're building it, we're now at the end, we have this product and, there's pressure to get it out the door. And so management, executive team will go, all right, well, I don't want to put a lot of money in, pushing it out the door, from a promotional standpoint. But why don't we just see if anybody wants this? And that's another substitute for a
Interesting.
soft. That's another way of thinking about a soft launch. It's a little jaded, but it happens a lot.
Gotcha. So Sayada M, who was, this question came from the career.pm community, asks, what is the product manager's role in a launch? Are we supposed to drive things?
Oh yeah. Okay. So the timing of that question is perfect because Greg and I are actually addressing that, and we've had a lot of discussions on it, and we really have to set up the context first. And so there are two considerations here. Consideration one is what we call the black box launch, meaning you work in a big company. We've got a machine over there that takes care of launching products, and I'm the product manager. And what is my role when I have this black box kind of launch? I posted an article this week on my blog on braincraft.com that kind of summarizes our thought process so far. And in this case, in the scenario where you're not driving the bus, but you're a critical member of the launch team, your job is to be the expert on the product, the expert on the users of the product. You probably have a lot of insight about the market and why you built it in the first place, what your product strategy is, right? What's the big picture, as well as what's the long term? Like, why did we build this in the first place, and how is it going to contribute to the success of the business? I see product managers playing that role. Absolutely. Now let's look at a scenario B. Scenario B is you don't have a black box, and in that case, I could make a really strong argument that the product manager should be the launch director. In that case, they should be driving the bus. It's their baby, right? They want to make sure it's successful. And in some cases, there's actually even a third scenario where no one's driving the bus. I mean, no one. It's just like we're just all running around chasing each other going, hey, marketing, do you have what you need? And marketing's going, Days, finance, do you have what you need? And legal is going, hey, no one's spoken to us yet. So, by the way, friends, the two groups in your organization that could stop a launch faster than any other group are legal and finance. So make them your friends.
Yeah, that's a super cool insight. And if a PM finds themselves, by the way, in the leaders group where we're live now, in the product management group, we did unscientific polls, Facebook polls, and it was about 2-to-1 product managers who actually had to drive launches, which really surprised me.
Yeah.
So more people than we know. And what I've seen online, if you do searches, is there are all these checklists. So it's basically, right, as a PM, a launch is basically just checking off things on a list. Is that right, Dave?
No, of course not. All right. you baited me. He set me up. For those of you who aren't familiar with me, I've always been a big antagonist when it comes to launch checklists. And you'll see those a lot in the black box style of launch. It's turn the crank, right? Oh, you got a product. You give us the raw materials, we'll make the sausage. You just don't worry about it, right? So, and I was always the annoying one that would say, well, if this is my menu item of things and you tell me I've got to write a blog series and we're going to do webinars and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and that's what a launch is, I would always say, well, how do you know those are the right things to do for this audience? And I would never get a good answer. And all right, so I've led marketing teams too. Here's what's going on. If you're in an organization where you're launching a lot of products, let me tell you, it is chaos for the marketing team. It is just chaos. And so they're getting it from all directions. Pick me. I'm a higher priority. I need more. When are you going to get this done? When are you going to get that done? And they finally reach a point where it is so inefficient. The logical conclusion for them is to say, look, let's just create a boilerplate of, a common method, a checklist of here's what we're going to do every time we launch a product. But they don't take into consideration that launching a new product into a new market is very, very different than launching a, say, new and improved version of an existing product to a familiar market. They're very different what you have to do. And so this is where that starts to fall apart, because everybody gets everything. It looks exactly the same. And customers even can't tell things apart because they look the same. So I just wanted to give that backdrop for everybody to give them the context of understanding what's going on in their world.
Yeah. So it's way
Yeah.
more than a checklist. If
Oh,
you
it's way
don't
more
know
than a
anything about
checklist.
launches, it's probably dangerous to think you can just download a checklist, right? It's
Right.
a set of skills most PMs probably don't have. If you find yourself in that position, launches are super important. You've killed yourself trying to get this thing out the market. It's a shame to really just kind of screw up the launch. So I think you have to go out and educate yourself or find people who know that. And the final observation is, I think these checklists can be kind of valuable, but if, like all checklists, if you're not careful, they will get you focused on outputs instead of outcomes,
That's right.
right? That these are we have to have this press release, we have to update the site with this, we need this
Hmm.
brochure, we need this demo or whatever. When you forget that the whole idea of this is to really like accelerate sales or
Accelerate.
adoption or,
Right. And by the way, my PM brothers and sisters out there, if you're getting that black box kind of approach and they say webinar and this and that, if you've done a good job of defining what the launch objectives are, at least what you're trying to get out of this launch, then you've got everything you need. You can say, how does that thing contribute to my launch objectives? And if the answer is, I don't know, then your response should be, then why are we doing it? Why are we wasting the resources on it? Or more than likely, what your answer is going to be is less specific than that. It's going to be, because they don't want to embarrass themselves. They're going to say, well, that's the way we do it. I'm like, then your answer is, well, then that's not good enough.
right.
We've invested a lot of money in building this product. Why shouldn't we use the same amount of attention to launching it?
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Dave, thanks so much. I think
You're
we
welcome.
got a ton of insight. I hope we answered folks' questions, and right, stranger things have happened. We could pop up again live.
That's right.
Okay.
All right.
I'm going to
Thanks,
see if I
Greg. Thanks,
can
everybody.